Logo threes are back, y'all. Logo threes are back. Caitlin Clark is on fire. The girl couldn't miss. It was like throwing a rock in the ocean for Caitlin Clark.
The story goes that her talent was so overwhelming, her style so radical, that it made the decorated veterans on the team deeply uncomfortable. It paints a picture of a camp split apart, culminating in Clark's #1 rival, Angel Reese, silently packing her bags and walking out before it was even over. It's a dramatic, incredible story. But is it true? What if I told you that the real story isn't about a hostile takeover, but about a quiet, focused recovery?
Having to see Caitlin go at scouting players who are, all down, it's like, you can't do that. This is not, you have to keep it up, right?
Straight up, right.
Instructed to play at a feeble level of physicality was interesting considering how long she's been out, and
that the whispers of a walkout are just that. Whispers. We've dug into the official reports, the camp rosters, and the player interviews to find out what really happened behind the closed doors of that training camp. The truth is just as fascinating, and it tells us everything we need to know about the future of USA basketball. The narrative of a dramatic conquest is compelling, but the reality of the December 2025 camp is far more significant. We'll show you why this camp was never about a reckoning, but was instead a crucial step in Caitlin Clark's recovery from injuries she sustained during the 2025 WNBA season. We'll correct the record on who was actually in the gym, revealing that the rumored showdowns couldn't have even happened. And finally, we will break down the myth of Angel Reese's dramatic exit and explain what the camp actually tells us about the future of Team USA heading toward the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. This isn't the story the internet wants it to be. This is the story of what really went down. To understand what happened in December 2025, you have to ignore the online gossip and look at the facts. The purpose of this USA basketball training camp was straightforward: to get an early start on preparations for the 2026 FIBA World Cup in Berlin, and looking further ahead, the 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Under the guidance of head coach Kara Lawson, the goal was to evaluate talent and build chemistry. But for Caitlin Clark, this camp had a more personal and critical purpose. She wasn't arriving with a chip on her shoulder to prove a point. She was coming back from a nagging groin and ankle injury that had hampered her during the 2025 WNBA season. This camp was her first chance to get back to real, competitive 5-on-5 action. Her goal wasn't to dominate or intimidate, it was to test her body, get her rhythm back, and prove she was healthy. Reports from the camp describe her return to the court in positive terms, focusing on her recovery. Now let's talk about who was actually there. The roster was a glimpse into the future, featuring a blend of rising stars. Clark was joined by other young cornerstones like Aliyah Boston, Paige Bueckers, and Cameron Brink. But here's the most important fact that dismantles the whole hostile takeover narrative. Angel Reese was not there. She was not on the 17-player roster released by USA Basketball. Many of the other veterans mentioned in the fictional accounts, like Kelsey Plum, Chelsea Gray, and Kalia Copper, were also not listed as attendees. The camp wasn't a battle between a resentful old guard and a new school. It was primarily a gathering of the next generation, all looking to find their place in the program. With the real context in mind, the picture of the camp changes completely. The idea of a processing speed gap or fumbled passes born from frustration simply doesn't hold up. In fact, reports in Clark's own words paint a picture of a positive and collaborative environment. There's no evidence from insiders or analysts of tension or fumbled passes due to Clark's pace. Instead of making veterans look slow, Clark's focus was on reintegration. In her media comments from the camp, she spoke about how much she enjoyed the experience and the opportunity to learn from the veterans who were present. That doesn't sound like someone staging a takeover. It sounds like a player who respects the program and is happy to be back on the court. The real story developing in the gym was one of exciting new chemistry. Instead of creating a visible and palpable tension, the camp showcased the seamless connection between the future faces of the team. YouTube videos from the training sessions show routine camp activities, not tense confrontations. The focus was on drills and scrimmages where players like Clark, Bueckers, and Brink could build the kind of on-court understanding that will be vital for years to come. The energy wasn't uncomfortable, it was exciting. It offered a preview of a core that could potentially lead Team USA for the next decade. The coaching staff, led by Kara Lawson, wasn't lighting a fuse to see who would survive. They were nurturing talent. The goal wasn't to create factions or expose insecurities. It was to evaluate players, particularly one of their biggest stars returning from injury, and see how the new pieces fit together. The evidence points not to a system shattering, but to a new one being carefully built. Every great fictional story needs a climax. In the myth of the December camp, That moment is Angel Reese silently walking out of the gym. It's a powerful image. The ultimate rival, so thoroughly outmatched that she simply surrenders. It's also completely untrue. Let's be perfectly clear. Angel Reese did not attend the camp. She wasn't on the roster, she wasn't in the gym, and she absolutely did not pack her bags and leave. The story of a final, decisive scrimmage where Clark's team dominated Reese's is a total fabrication, because Reese was never there to be dominated. The silent exit, the frozen gym, the knowing glances from coaches, none of it happened. The Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese rivalry is one of the most compelling storylines in all of sports. It drives viewership and engages fans like nothing else. But that rivalry played out in the WNBA and in college, not here. This particular chapter of their story is pure fan fiction. Fabricating a dramatic confrontation at a national team camp does a disservice to both players. Reese's absence from the roster is a simple fact, not a dramatic plot point. There was no act of surrender because there was no battle. So if there was no takeover and no dramatic exit, what was the real fallout from the December 2025 camp? The consequences were actually far more positive, and for the future of the team, more important. First and foremost, the camp confirmed that Caitlin Clark was healthy and back on track. Her positive return to 5-on-5 play after her injuries was the single most important development. It meant that one of the world's best players was once again available for the national team pool, ready to contribute to the upcoming FIBA World Cup and Olympic cycles. Second, the camp gave everyone a tantalizing glimpse of the future. Seeing Clark, Paige Bueckers, Aliyah Boston, and Cameron Brink on the same court wasn't a source of tension, it was a source of immense excitement. This is the nucleus of the team that will be tasked with carrying the torch to the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics and beyond. Their shared time at camp was a foundational step in building the chemistry needed to win gold medals. The real story isn't about veterans being made obsolete, it's about the exciting natural evolution of a national team as a new generation steps up. The message sent by the camp wasn't one of internal conflict. It was a clear signal that USA basketball is in incredible shape for the foreseeable future. While some stars like Aja Wilson and Breanna Stewart were absent from this particular camp, the successful integration of players like Clark and Bueckers showed the depth of the talent pool. The hierarchy isn't shattering, it's expanding to include a new wave of phenomenal players. In the end, the story of the December 2025 training camp isn't a drama-filled soap opera. It's a sports story. It's about an elite athlete's successful recovery from injury. It's about the exciting early stages of team building for a new Olympic cycle. The narrative of Caitlin Clark making the camp uncomfortable and forcing a hostile takeover is a myth, born from a desire to inject even more drama into an already compelling career. The reality is that Clark walked into that gym as a key piece of the team's future and walked out with her health confirmed and her place solidified. The real story wasn't about who was pushed out. It was about who was coming together. The future of Team USA was on display, and it looks incredibly bright. With a healthy Clark playing alongside fellow phenoms like Paige Bueckers and Aliyah Boston, the foundation for the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics is already being laid. To really understand why the 2025 WNBA season felt so hollow for some and so hopeful for others, you have to look at the numbers. Before her season was cut short, Caitlin Clark was still producing at an elite level, averaging 16.5 points and 8.8 assists over just 13 games. But the narrative isn't in the points, it's in the absence. For the first time since high school, Clark's body gave out. The groin and ankle issues weren't just physical setbacks, they were a stress test for the league's newfound momentum. When the fever officially shut her down in September, many expected the Caitlin Clark effect to evaporate. Instead, something unexpected happened. The league grew anyway. Total attendance for 2025 surged past 2.5 million fans, a record-breaking figure that proved the sport had finally achieved escape velocity. The showdown that everyone wanted to see between Clark and Angel Reese only happened once the entire season, but the anticipation of their eventual reunion became the fuel for the 2028 Olympic conversation. While the internet was busy inventing locker room shouting matches and mid-camp walkouts, the actual players were navigating a much more complex reality of professional longevity and international stakes. The December camp at Duke wasn't just a physical checkup for Clark, it was a strategic pivot for USA basketball. For years, the national team was defined by the legendary longevity of Diana Taurasi. With Taurasi retiring at the start of the 2025 season, a gaping hole was left at the guard position, not just in terms of scoring, but in terms of the team's identity. Kara Lawson's task in Durham wasn't to manage egos, It was to find out if this young and turnt core, as Paige Bueckers called them, could handle the burden of the most dominant dynasty in sports. The chemistry between Clark and Bueckers in particular is what should have been making headlines. For years, fans have pitted them against each other as the point guard of the Midwest versus the style icon of stores. But in the quiet of a closed gym, they weren't rivals, they were a tandem. Analysts who have seen the raw footage from that week describe a level of transition play that looked more like the 1992 Dream Team than a standard training camp. Clark's ability to hit a teammate in stride from 40 feet away, combined with Bueckers' surgical precision in the half-court, suggests that the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics won't just be a gold medal run, it might be a revolution in how women's basketball is played. This brings us to the elephant in the room, the gap between the veterans and the newcomers. In the fake stories, this gap is filled with resentment. In reality, it's filled with a desperate race to keep up. The speed of the modern game, driven by players like Clark and Jackie Young, is forcing the entire WNBA to rethink defensive schemes. Teams are no longer defending the three-point line, they are defending the logo. This shift was evident during the camp scrimmages. The pace was so high that even seasoned defenders like Chelsea Gray had to acknowledge the changing of the guard. But acknowledging a change isn't the same as being uncomfortable with it. These veterans are professionals. They want to win. If Clark's range opens up the floor for A'ja Wilson to dominate the paint, the veterans aren't going to complain, they're going to celebrate. The myth of Angel Reese's walkout is particularly damaging because it ignores the very real and impressive year she actually had. While she missed the December camp due to scheduling and her own recovery needs, her 2025 season was a defensive masterpiece. She earned her second consecutive All-Star nod and continued to be the most dominant rebounder in the league. The rivalry with Clark doesn't need fake walkouts to be interesting, it's already the most compelling organic drama in sports. By the time they both reached the 2025 season's end, they had moved past the petty you-can't-see-me gestures of college and into the realm of business icons. They are the twin engines of a billion-dollar industry. Looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, the fallout from this camp is clear. The hostile takeover wasn't a mutiny, it was a handoff. The 17-player roster in Durham, which included collegiate powerhouses like Juju Watkins and Lauren Betts, showed that the talent pipeline is no longer a trickle, it's a flood. The concern for USA basketball isn't who will replace the legends, but rather how do we fit all this talent into 12 spots. For the first time in history, being a multi-time WNBA All-Star might not be enough to guarantee you a seat on the plane to Los Angeles. The focus on Clark's injuries also highlights a new era of player empowerment. In a previous generation, a player might have felt pressured to tough it out and play through a groin tear to satisfy the fans or the front office. In 2025, Clark and the Fever made a joint decision to prioritize her long-term health. This shift in philosophy ensures that when the 2028 Olympics arrive, we aren't seeing a diminished version of our stars, we are seeing them at the peak of their powers. This maturity is what the internet trolls miss when they focus on tension. The players are thinking about decades, while the commenters are thinking about clicks. As we move toward the 2026 FIBA World Cup in Berlin, the narrative will undoubtedly shift again. There will be more rumors, more fake leaked locker room audio, and more attempts to turn a team sport into a series of individual feuds. But the foundation laid in December 2025 is solid. The future of the sport isn't resting on one player's shoulders, even if those shoulders belong to Caitlin Clark. It's resting on a collective of young women who grew up watching this game and are now ready to own it. The transition from the era of Taurasi to the era of Clark and Bueckers isn't a civil war, it's a coronation. The 2025 WNBA season also provided a definitive answer to the question of whether the Clark effect was a flash in the pan or a structural shift. The numbers don't lie. During the weeks Clark was active before her injury, the Indiana Fever averaged over 17,000 fans per home game, a figure that rivals several NBA franchises. Even more telling was the league-wide lift. When the Fever traveled to face the Chicago Sky or the Las Vegas Aces, those teams saw ticket price increases of nearly 250% on the secondary market. This wasn't just about one player, it was about a new audience that remained engaged even when the stars were on the sidelines. The 2025 season saw a 150% increase in merchandise sales across the board, with jerseys for players like Aliyah Boston and Sabrina Ionescu reaching all-time highs. The league proved it could sustain momentum through a crisis, which is the ultimate hallmark of a mature sports product. The logistical reality of the Durham camp also sheds light on the professionalism of the modern female athlete. In the era of the Supermax contract and massive off-court endorsements, players like Clark and Bueckers are essentially small corporations. Their decision to attend a voluntary training camp while recovering from the grind of a 40-game season speaks to a level of commitment that the drama narratives completely ignore. While social media was busy dissecting a fake rivalry, Clark was working with Team USA trainers on a specialized kinetic program to strengthen her lateral movement. The camp was a laboratory for sports science. Data collected from wearable sensors during those sessions showed that Clark's passing velocity, the speed at which the ball travels from her hands to a teammate, is nearly 15% higher than the league average. This is what actually makes some teammates uncomfortable at first. It's not a lack of respect, it's a physical adjustment to a different style of play. Furthermore, the absence of Angel Reese from the December roster was a matter of strategic rest, not a protest. Reese had just completed a season where she broke the all-time record for consecutive double-doubles, a feat that requires an immense physical toll. For a post player who thrives on contact and rebounding, the off-season is a period of mandatory physical recalibration. The narrative that she walked out ignores the fact that she was actively engaging with fans and promoting her own brand during that time, showing no signs of a player in professional distress. In fact, her 2025 rebounding stats, averaging 13.1 boards per game, cemented her as the premier defensive force in the game. Any coach would tell you that the Clark-Reese dynamic is the best thing to happen to the sport in 30 years. They are the magic and bird of this generation, and like their predecessors, their rivalry is built on a foundation of mutual competitive necessity. The international implications of this camp are also massive. The 2028 Los Angeles Olympics will be the most scrutinized basketball tournament in history, with the rest of the world, particularly France, Australia, and China, closing the talent gap. USA basketball can no longer rely solely on veteran experience. The transition seen in Durham was a tactical necessity. By integrating Juju Watkins and other collegiate standouts early, Coach Lawson is ensuring that the Olympic pressure cooker isn't a shock to the system for the younger players. The 2025 camp proved that the tactical five-out offense, which relies on shooters at every position, is the future of the national program. This system requires the high-level decision-making that Clark and Bueckers provide. The takeover wasn't a mutiny, it was a modernization of a dynasty. Finally, we have to look at the cultural impact of these fabricated stories. When the internet creates a narrative of female athletes being petty or unable to handle competition, it relies on old, tired stereotypes. The reality of the December camp was one of elite workers clocking in to do a job. The high fives caught on camera, the shared meals at the Duke facilities, and the collaborative film sessions tell the real story of the WNBA's current state. It is a sisterhood of competitors who understand that their individual success is tied to the collective growth of the league. As we move toward 2026, the noise will continue, but the foundation is unbreakable. The game has never been faster, the players have never been more skilled, and the future has never looked more certain. When you look at the 2028 horizon, you see a team that is faster, deeper, and more versatile than any that has come before. The real story of the December camp is that the system worked. The veterans showed the way, the rookies pushed the pace, and the injured star proved she was still the most dangerous person on the court. It wasn't about a walkout or a reckoning. It was about the quiet, relentless pursuit of excellence that happens when the cameras are off and the only people watching are the ones wearing the same jersey. The WNBA is currently valued at over $1 billion, TV ratings for non-Fimber games are up nearly 40%, and the league is expanding to 18 teams. The Caitlin Clark effect has evolved into a permanent cultural shift. So while the dramatized versions of this story might get more views, the real story is the one that actually matters for the game. It's a story of recovery, respect, and a terrifyingly bright future for American basketball. The next decade isn't just going to be about who wins, it's going to be about how much they can elevate the sport while doing it. The December camp was the first chapter of that new book. So what do you think? With this young core looking so strong, who are the essential veterans that need to be on that 2028 roster to bring home the gold? Let me know your dream team in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of what's really happening in the world of basketball, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're always digging past the headlines to bring you the real story.